Доброго дня, шановні пані.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. UCMC starts its working day, and we greet everyone who joined us here and online. We thank you for this interest to our presentation. This is an overview of the major Russian information influence operations in Ukraine for the first half of 2021. And I would like to remind to you that this is the analytical report of the hybrid warfare analytical group at Ukraine Crisis Media Center that systemizes major operations of Russian information influence in Ukraine, and they used different sources and standardized survey. And I would like to introduce our speakers who joined us today. Valeriy Alexandrovich, head of the board of Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Oleksandra Tsekhanovska, head of hybrid warfare analytical group at UCMC, and Ksenia Illuk, analyst of Detector Media NGO. And we soon be joined by Shutov, coordinator of coordinator of open information partnership in the countries of Eastern Partnership. First, I would like to give the floor to Valeriy, and he is going to tell us why this research is important for Ukraine and for the world. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm glad that we have such an opportunity to speak in these tense times. And these are important things. We should have a systemic approach towards them. They heavily influence the security in Ukraine, not only information security, but also on the ability of Ukraine to counteract new threats and challenges. And you know that from the very start, the Ukraine Crisis Media Center had one of the priorities to reveal such information attacks that now have signs of special operations, and we should assess them like that as systemic, repeated operations. And it is evident that for us, for many years, this was one of the priorities for our activity. And you may know that the hybrid warfare analytical group during these years, headed by Ms. Tsipulska and now Oleksandra, heads this center. They did a lot in order to reveal and assess such operations, these information influences, and also to identify the focus areas that are targeted by our enemy, and they study the sources, the instruments, and how these attacks are carried out. And we need such analysis because continuously we have changes. And I would like to say that each time there are constant surveys, and now we have a fundamental document that is overview of the major Russian influence operations in Ukraine for the first half of 2021, and we had many reports before. We analyzed the situation in accordance with dynamic changes in the world, and I would like to note that this work is an analytical one that is carried out in two languages. Second language is English, in order that our partners, those who support this activity, who support Ukraine, in order that they will be able to coordinate and assess our common goals, in order that we will be more efficient. And there's now several words why this issue is even more important now. Because on the eve of training, West 2021, Russia, Belarus, and previous escalation, Russia, they didn't withdraw their troops from our borders, and now we see serious signals concerning prohibition of OSCE monitoring mission presence in the points at the border, at the checkpoints at the border. And we see the signs that Russia now and continuously gets prepared and is ready to use the army, armored forces and their mercenaries to attack Ukraine. And at the same time, Ukraine was successful in forming international network of solidarity. And you may see during the last period that the United States is the key leader of the support for Ukraine. Not only US, this is NATO, European Union, and those countries that support the Ukrainian Crimean platform that is powerful. And there are many attempts to torpedo this initiative, and there is a lot of disinformation. There are information attacks on this platform, and we are going to hear about it. And these countries, they support Ukraine, its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And we all understand that today no one wants, and Ukraine doesn't want to have an escalation of the conflict, because there may be another phase of hot war that was delivered by Russia. We have people who died in this war, and this escalation is a probable scenario. In these conditions, there is agreement among international partners that we should implement all the measures in order that Russia won't be able to cross this next red line. And in such conditions, we see that there are orders to attack us in different ways, and there are consequences that are being also assessed. And Russian Federation increases those mechanisms, and they do not want to use, firstly, these heavy means, and now they become more active in information area. They will intensify them. They spend huge resources for this, and they believe that this may be even more efficient, and they expect, really, they do it constantly, that they will destabilize us, that they will undermine our state, and the corruption won't be overcome, and this will undermine ability of Ukraine to defend itself. And they try to use Ukrainian media resources and Ukrainian politicians, and this is not new. And we should take into account that this area will be the area of the focus of the activity. And the main is to efficiently counteract this. And this is the task not only for the state, but this is the task for NGOs, for civil society. And we unite the efforts together with the Ukrainian structures horizontally with our partners. And Detector media and different projects are presented here. And I would like to say that there is contribution from different organizations, from NGOs, who continuously deal with these hybrid threats in information area. And these connections, this work, this group, this network, this is a great result of the work of many years. And we cooperate with the government, and we also ask our experts to work in some state institutions to increase their capabilities, the capabilities of bodies of power. And this cooperation is really needed. I won't go into detail, but if we're speaking about governmental sector, there is a problem of right communication and also right work with the NGOs in this area. So this is one more result and the hybrid warfare analytical group. I would like to thank all the colleagues who joined this work on this analytical report on the major Russian information influence, and we believe that based on these results, there will be recommendations for the state bodies of power to get prepared, to be more efficient in fighting Russian information attack and potentially attacks from other sides. Thank you for paying attention to this topic. We thank the journalists who highlight this topic. And on the backdrop of political events, I believe that Russian threats and the analysis, they should be promoted, and we should also focus on this continuous war that was not announced but carried out by Russia, and UCMC will inform about what is going on, and we should understand that if we know the objective situation, if we know our enemy, if we know how to counteract and we know who are our allies, we will have peace. And if we are weak and vulnerable and inefficient, then this will be like an invitation for our aggressor to continue. And that's why we would like to weaponize ourselves, and we would like to see the key problems and the areas of attacks and how we may counteract them. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for introductory words and for inspiring words. And this is a difficult and very needed work. And I give the floor to Oleksandra Tsekhanovska, and she's going to tell us more about the structure of this report and about the most important things in this that were systematized. Thank you very much, Victoria and Valeriy, and I'm really grateful to all those who are here today and those who watch us online. I know that there are many people who watch us, especially those from NGOs and experts who participated in creation of this analytical report, and we are grateful to them for this. And I'm really happy to introduce the results of the work of our team. We spent a lot of time and effort for this, and I believe that it is really worth it. If we are speaking about overview of the major Russian information influence operations in Ukraine for the first half year 2021. Victoria and Valeriy Alexeyevich mentioned that this is really important to systematize these destabilizing efforts. And we know that they are the integral component of aggressive policy of Crimea directed against Ukraine and against the whole Western democratic world. Speaking about Ukraine, and these operations and their categories, I'm going to speak in more detail. There are 4 more aims, but this is not exhaustive list of strategic map of aggression of Kremlin, and all these goals, they are interrelated among themselves. You may see them on the screen. First, this is destabilization in Ukraine from inside, and here important role is played by local agents of influence. Second is legitimization of occupation of Ukrainian territories, and Russia works for international audience and tries to promote this inside Ukraine, and also this is reinforcement of Russian influence in Ukraine in different levels, starting political one to a cultural one, and discreditation of Ukraine in the eyes of its international partners in order that Kiev remained one-on-one with Moscow. And if we're speaking about the main characteristic of Russian disinformation, I believe not only Russian as a system, and we based our report on this is dichotomy. First, the systematicity and adaptability of Russian disinformation, and we know that these operations are systemic. They are carried out year after year through different channels of communication, and they use different information content. And when we try to close one channel, they open another channel through which they put this disinformation. And this is adaptability, and we should take this adaptability into account. And our report is based on standardized survey of experts who represent NGO in information security, and also based on monitoring of open sources. Primary and secondary sources were used. I won't go into detail of methodology because this is the most boring part, and I disagree with this. And I would like to mention that primary sources may be divided into three main categories. First, this is Russian media. You may see top Russian channels and news and political programs. This is quality monitoring. Pro-Russian media in Ukraine. You may see on the screen channels of Viktor Medvedchuk, and we started this work before these channels were blocked. And separately, pro-Russian political Telegram channels. The short list is on the screen, but I should say that we have much more information than this, because pro-Russian Telegram is having a network, and they make a lot of reposts. And when you subscribe to one of them, you consume a lot of information from different Telegram channels of pro-Russian pool. All these operations in first half year may be divided into four main categories. All these categories are connected chronologically, and this doesn't mean that when one wave ends, for the first operations connected with vaccination against coronavirus, then they are not in the focus. This is not true. They continue the work on this, but the peaks of intensivity may be shown in the order that these operations are considered in our report that will be available today on the website of Ukraine Crisis Media Center in Ukrainian and English, and printed material you may find in UCMC.
Coming back to the vaccination issue, the surveys about vaccination and work on them started a year ago. So first of all, we should look at the support to the vaccination movement. Anti-vaccination movement is not purely Kremlin invention. Actually, this is the topic which exists in many societies, and here the Kremlin follows its well-paved way when they find the problem point and starts to make pressure in it to destabilize the situation from inside. The agent of this influence last year was so-called Ukrainian Orthodox Church under Moscow Patriarchy, which encouraged its faithful to counteract to so-called faithful vaccination and held anti-vaccination campaign based not on proved facts, but presented it like the opinion of all faithful Orthodox Christian in Ukraine as opponents to the vaccination. Also, this was closely related to the Sputnik V vaccine produced by the Russian Federation, and this was opposed to all the negative reports about Western vaccines. And each time when there were reports about launching of application of new Western vaccines in Ukraine, the new misinformation campaign from Kremlin started to roll out. For example, the biggest anti-vaccination campaign was connected to AstraZeneca, and this was organized by the Medvedchuk's informational channel. This vaccine was presented by the Kremlin as the one which is directly aimed at cutting down the numbers of Ukrainian population. They also used a big deal of humor, and this made that campaign more successful. Then there was another fragment of that campaign connected to the Bialy Kharkiv company, which is in more detail described in our report. Another false statement was about Russophobia among Ukrainian government, which is ready to buy bad quality collective West vaccines instead of quality Russian one. Also, another big piece of massive campaign, increasing numbers of troops at the border could be easily predicted with early misinformation coming from the Russian media channels about raising numbers of troops by Ukraine on the border. This made us immediately cautious and allowed to predict that the numbers of troops at the border would rise. Then the case about misinformation, intentional misinformation about killed teenager at the border. Then aggressive rhetoric, which is peculiar for all those sources. They blamed the Ukrainian government that under pressure from Western partners, it had become part of the aggressive anti-Russian policy, and that it was unable to make independent decisions. Actually, this is a part of the standard Russian narrative about Ukraine as a puppet of the Western countries. Another case is about Sea Breeze 2021 after the military exercises received false requests for submission of personal data, and the leadership of the Sea Breeze military exercises had to disclaim that request and announce that they had no connection with those requests. We now do not know who stood behind that case, but this is actually the modus operandi of the Russian disinformation and special services. Another big case is about the past in the Ukrainian USSR, the great victory in the Great Patriotic War, how this is called. This is the narrative which is much valued by the Kremlin propagandists. That's why Kremlin takes it rather painfully when other countries, former Soviet countries, try to shift to the more quiet and more plain and commemorative practices about the memories of the Second World War. This topic usually is put on the table in May on the war anniversary, and this year again. This topic was raised again when there was attempts to blame that Ukrainian authorities tried to sieve the Victory Day. Then the rhetoric about fascism in Ukraine, the use of the immortal detachment to increase the tension, and broad use of historical revision to raise the opinion about the Soviet Union. Then strengthening the tension points in relations of neighboring countries, for example, between Ukraine and Poland, between and Hungary. Of course, due to the long history, there might be points of tension, but these points should be smoothed, not sharpened. And here you can clearly observe three clear vectors which follow the three main vectors of Ukrainian cooperation with the Western countries, with the EU, NATO, and IMF, and all the Russian narratives are aimed at undermining relations with those countries. So this is about external governance, about the no perspective for Ukraine in EU, negative image of Western partners, and escalation at the front, along the front line. So together, for the future informational attacks, we can more or less surely predict the following ones: continuous anti-vaccination campaign, discreditation of the Western vaccines, and raising non-trust to the Ministry of Public Health. Then the next area is discreditation of reforms and strengthening the narration about external governance. The next trend would be about Crimean platform and the occupation policy, and presentation of this policy as a failed policy and as a wasting of money. Then continued unlawful passportization in the occupied territories and possible voting for the State Duma candidates in the occupied territories, and also discreditation of anti-Russian measures in Ukraine, and possible launch of new disinformation channels. Unfortunately, we do not have more time for presentation, and with this I give the floor back to Victoria. Thank you, Oleksandra, for presentation of the report. We have understood how multiple example how multifaceted the disinformation is. Now my question to Roman, what are the biggest challenges for the special governmental institutions whose task is to counteract this? Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank to Oleksandra, to all my colleagues for the interest to this product. I was the first, perhaps, who read that report, and I would like to start sharing my opinion from the second part of it. I believe this report contains very powerful messages. Actually, you would not notice that at a first glance, but they had become the leitmotif of the report. The first leitmotif is about challenges. This main idea is about changing focus. We should build up resilience, stronger resilience, and overcoming weaknesses. Anti-disinformation work traditionally is understood as discovering and presentation of all the false facts and narratives. Unfortunately, this strategy entails just responding on the blows. That is, the aggressor always makes first step, and then you're forced to make a step in response. And actually, this is extremely expensive strategy. You have to discover, to follow up, to administer, to counteract, to all that information channels, which is actually the huge work. It is actually like following the disinformation, and in order to denounce it, you actually have to repeat it, which is absolutely wrong strategy. While building up resilience is just different strategy. Building up resilience means to understand the motives of those people who are unwillingly involved into deceitful practices, into deceitful sharing of information. For example, deceits about a killed or eaten boy. While today we will be deceived about vaccines, tomorrow we would be manipulated with terrifying descriptions of the magnet fields, etc. So we have to building up resilience means building up the awareness how the information works and how this world actually functions, how it operates on everyday basis. You have to understand the world, and applying this strategy, you have a larger field for operation, for performance around you. And the second message which this report contains, and which is important, for years we have been saying that this country has to activate its anti-propagandist work against Kremlin, for example. But we still feel that nothing is being happened. And I believe the main reason is the lack of institutional memory, the lack of inherited accumulated efforts. Each minister who comes into position starts from scratch. Well, we should build up on each new level of achievements, and this means that this work of counteraction to propaganda and misinformation should be institutionalized, and this institutionalization of the process should be properly reflected in the legislative framework, and the centers of counteraction to misinformation should be established not just on paper, but they should be clearly institutionalized with proper description how they have to reveal misinformation, what they should do to overcome it, how they should act. And this is the task for the Council of National Defense. I believe that all those informational agencies have accumulated huge experience through the years. And in this report, which we are discussing today, and which is supported by the civil society, it is clearly demonstrated the newly established centers should be properly protected against toxic influence of the governmental bodies in today's Ukraine. Actually, each governmental body is the center of influence, and there is always this struggle for this center of influence among those who are seeking for favors, for money, for glories, etc. And this should be clearly separated from counter misinformation centers, so to say. The ideal model upon which we expect becomes possible only when the leaders of such centers clearly understand that they should remain unbiased, they should remain impartial, and remain, due to this independence, remain influential among governmental bodies. I hope that joint efforts, our joint efforts will allow to form this informational mainstream and allow more professional approach to resolving the issue of misinformation and propaganda. Thank you. On the one hand, we observed many narratives, wrong narratives. On the other hand, we know that there are technical threats. What are those technical risks which you might characterize?
Oleksandra.
Thank you for invitation, and we thank the team. And these are emotional matters that traumatize our psychological health, and we should be careful about it. Thank you. And about the challenges we're going to face, I would like to focus on technologies. The matter is, as Roman said, this report has clear messages, and we should view them not only in the context of Ukraine and how Ukraine develops, but in the context of the world and what is going on in the world. If we are speaking about technologies in the context of our development now, and concerning the topic of disinformation technologies, they play nearly the major role in this. And we are dealing with the development of artificial intelligence that may change how we understand disinformation today. Here in this report, we analyze different channels, sites, Telegram channels, and other sources. We understand that a lot of efforts are put into human resources and financing are directed to create them, to provide content to them. Media has huge budget, and it takes a lot of time to make these products. About technologies and what they can do, the elements of artificial intelligence, and maybe in the future, artificial intelligence will help to produce such things at a higher pace and with less costs. If we are speaking about volumes of the messages and narratives that we will have, so now there are technologies. One fake message may be written by the algorithm. And we should take this into account. This is the first thing we should remember. And why it is so important, because this may lead us to the area. There is such a notion, post-truth, and they like to use it. And I personally do not share this. I do not believe that we are at the in the epoch of post-truth. I believe that this epoch will start when deepfake will be so powerful that it cannot be dealt with by human resources. But now we see that this technology is still not so well developed, and research shows that in 3 or 4 years, this technology will be perfect, and we as human beings won't be able to rely on our sight, on our hearing, on our cognitive skills. No matter how powerful they are, we won't be able to understand that we are deceived. And this is revolutionary matter in order to understand this information and fighting with that. Because we should not be naive in this. We should understand that key players, for example, Russia, will be among the first who will use this technology, including against us. And we should take this into account. And these are threats, the field of the threats we are in, what we may do to respond to these threats. And we should improve our understanding. And I share the opinion of Roman, who speaks about resilience. Here we should divide human and technology matters. We should develop human things, we should develop our cognitive abilities and skills, and we should develop technology. And in the future, those who control technology will win. When I speak about deep fake, those who control it will win. And these will be not even states, but technological giants who will have technology that will automatically be able to do this, to identify that this is deep fake and block them or share them. And this is an important aspect. And in Ukraine, we should understand this, because technological companies, they are the players in the field, and they may be powerful as states, and some of them have more budgets than some countries, yearly budget, I mean, and we should understand this. What can we do with this? The matter is, I shared my opinion with my colleagues, and they said, relax. It will take a lot of time to reach this technological progress. This is yes and no. We have efforts to digitalize our state, to digitalize services, and we, consciously or unconsciously, having good things in mind, we may end up with these problems sooner than they would come to us in a natural way. And this is about privacy of personal data and what we may do with this, how to use them correctly. And if the state centers this data, we should trust the state, and the state should have the technologies that will allow us to trust it. And this is an important message for communication. I believe it should be. And I believe that this is lacking. And we should develop this and We should develop technological sector and to provide better conditions for those who deal with these issues. And this is a good way, but we should understand that we should have all this now. And the centers are being developed, the centers of artificial intelligence, and the best talents are there. And we should focus these talents here. And we have big potential in this. We have a lot of talented people, and we should provide them with the objective. And people like to work for the higher goal, not just do something. And we should have this in mind and understanding the challenges we face and the challenges we will face in 2 or 3 years. We should understand that we have recommendations concerning regulations at the legislative level and other things what we should be careful in order not to regulate them too much and to provide freedom for development of technology. And we should not become the world that is regulated just by technology, and we should be not in the hands of some manipulators, because this is a terrible threat for Ukraine and for the world. And the European Union, they are also lagging behind in technology, but this is a huge opportunity for us, and we should be able to fight misinformation in this field. We understand that this is work in progress, and I give the floor to speakers to respond. If you have some remarks, then we go to Q&A session. Valeriy Alexeyevich, please, you're given the floor. This is not remark, but I provided introduction to this topic, and my colleagues provided interesting input. And of course, our work inspires us and provides us with a lot of information. And I may speak also about technology. And Ksenia is correct that these technologies, they will be targeted on some audiences. For example, a robot creates it and then brings it to your email, for example. It exists even now. And I would like to say, when you remember about history, this for example, plastic was invented a long time ago, but it started to be used when it became cheap. And this is the issue of resources. And resources is a different topic. Who is going to invest such resources? What corporations? What countries? For example, for Russia and for authoritarian regimes that use, first of all, arms, weapons, and for them, they may spend a lot of money for this, and democratic nations, they have discussions concerning balance between freedom and dictatorship. And the story is one more challenge for us. We didn't raise this issue, but colleagues who work in this area, they know that often they use such an argument now in Ukraine that if there is criticism, including in this area you've mentioned, if there is criticism, this means who does this is the Russian agent. And there are objective things that are criticized inside Ukraine, including by NGOs. And how to differentiate these issues, because we do not have a powerful robot for this, and we should do it ourselves. And I absolutely agree that the resilience and institutional capability of the state and state governance, this is the basic element. But the truth is, we are attacked today. In order to be more institutionally capable, we need time, and I believe that motivation and political will are needed. What is going on right now? I believe that a lot of things we understand. There is analysis of situation, of threats, but what do we have in practice? Sometimes we have a deterioration of the situation that we had before. For example, I will bring such an example. If you go to the eastern part of Ukraine, and for some time you didn't have opportunity to watch Russian channels, and now situation changed. There is free access to Russian state channels, and Ukrainian channels are commercialized. And they are closed because of this. And we're speaking about the influence of agents, but here you see that there is direct renewed information through Russian channels. This is for sure, and this is a good example. And we are speaking about literacy, and more people use social media, Telegram, but TV is the key instrument of provision of information to people, especially if this is not about big cities. So this all goes parallel, so we should know about it. But we have, for example, high precision weapons, and also we have tanks, and tanks attacked us. Artillery systems were used, and they are the continuation of the weapons from the Second World War. So this goes in complex. It doesn't change at once. This is one thing I wanted to say. The next one is about the big problem, about critical thinking. In UCMC, we pay a lot of attention to this. We have a separate project on this that deal with such communication, how to teach young people to provide them information about critical thinking. This is not about knowledge, this is also about skills. If you do not have proper sources and you have only fake information, so this task will be too complicated. I will bring an example, the visit of Ukrainian president to Washington. This was really important, and there was a wave of comments. And our center also joined the preparation of some materials for the visit. And IMF was mentioned by Oleksandra. And what about Ukrainian power until yesterday? And I worked in this area for many years. I analyzed these things. And until tomorrow, they didn't speak why there was no traditional meeting of the president with IMF, and everyone spoke about it in the negative sense. And the Russian commentators and our commentators provided their opinion. But yesterday they said that Ksenia Georgieva was not in the office at the time. If it is true, and I believe this is true, why they didn't say this before that? All fakes will be ruined by this phrase. And this is about ability to communicate properly, to provide the position in order to be heard by some audiences. For example, Russian channels find the way to these audiences, and there are many like this in Ukraine. Another matter that we pay attention to. Previously, on TV channels, in the media, there was some balance of opinion, some competitiveness of opinions. Now they are separated. For example, pro-power or oligarchic channels that support the power, they traditionally do this because they want to earn money. And the champions and they speak about championship of the power, and we watch opposition channels, and then they criticize our power heavier than Russian channels, that we are ruined and we won't be able to go up. So also, before that, people saw some positions. Now channels got separated in their opinions, and it doesn't mean that people may make the right opinion. They just separated their positions that are provided by different TV channels. So Detector media write a lot about professionalism in journalism, and we should pay more attention to this topic. And about institutional capabilities, this is the complex of actions by the state, parliament, president, government, in order not to allow such attacks. This should be done on a systemic level. One more aspect. You've heard, and Alexandra mentioned about this, about our conclusions and about our forecasts and recommendations. This is part that is a key part. I believe that this will be considered by those who work in this area. In a broader sense, we could, I mean, the government and the deputies, now situation is really dynamic. Presidents and parliaments change, and they should not start everything from scratch. Especially when I hear non-professional assessments, when people's deputies, pro-power deputies, they comment in a way that the world appeared when they came to power and there was nothing before this. So they do not have time, because of the state affairs, that they didn't read the documents, they haven't read these analytical reports. So first we should raise literacy and political hygiene of politicians first, and of the deputies. And experience is really important. So it's not difficult to identify what the Ukrainian politicians provide fakes if you have other information. But I see that we produce a lot of fakes, maybe the same amount as Russian power produces. So there are also some mistakes that prevent us from understanding, and we have a lot of challenges, and I believe that until robots are in work, in operation, and we do not have this institutional capabilities, deputies, at least before adopting important laws, they first study previous experience. And I did this when I worked in governmental positions, and I wish this to our current officials.
Any further interventions before we start our Q&A session? Well, nobody out of speakers. Then we shift to Q&A session. And when you are thinking about your questions, I will read the questions from the Facebook. We have got two questions to Oleksandra. What are those weaknesses which the Russian disinformation is targeting most in Ukraine? Thank you for this question. When Kremlin develops its strategy of informational influence, or the strategy of hybrid impact on Ukraine, it bases it not on the local influencers who are seen as an important source, but it also bases it on the weaknesses which are inherent in Ukraine as a country and Ukrainian society, and exploiting those weaknesses, you may reach better results. That is, you may uh, reach instability inside Ukrainian society very easily through the following weaknesses: low level of trust to the government authorities and to the governmental institutions. Our surveys demonstrate the low trust to the institutions, and all the criticism about Ukrainian institutions allows the Kremlin to follow the famous narrative about Ukraine as a failed state. Another weakness: incoherent communication coming from the authorities, governmental authorities, and this again contributes to the growth of the insufficient trust, that is, to the growth of distrust. Then the next weakness is insufficient social and economic basic knowledge among population. It's easy to exploit this low awareness and to manipulate with the people. All the manipulations by the opposition platform for life were based on this low awareness in economic issues. Then high level of corruption, which again supports the statement about failed state. Then the misuse of public finance, then insufficient understanding of the importance of special services and the activities, the lack of the joint voice when speaking in the international forum. Actually, all those weaknesses are not created by Kremlin, but they are widely used by Kremlin to develop misinformation. And from this comes the conclusion that we have to strengthen ourselves as a government, as a country, and as a society. Based on that, we produced two sets of recommendations. One set of recommendations for the government, another set of recommendations for the civil society. Thank you. The next question: how Ukraine can cooperate with international partners for joint counteraction to misinformation? Perhaps this is the best question to Mr. Charlie, because it's your area of professional interest. Thank you. Quite long ago, we worked on disinformation, creating the centers against cyber attacks. It was even before the cyber attacks started to enroll. Then in 2014, many countries experienced the Russian attacks, and now in many countries we witnessed the cyber attacks, and this draw attention of those who allocate money for those types of work. In the United States now, they have established rather powerful structures which counteract to the informational threats and counteract to propaganda. Unfortunately, all those centers work not in our region. They continue to work in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and keeping in mind that what's going on there now, you clearly understand that we should not expect for the inflow of resources to Ukraine. I mean, counteraction to misinformation. And you can clearly observe how Russia uses this information, spreading the vision of Ukraine as the second Afghanistan, etc. But we can use the gained experience, the experience that we gained in the past. And even in public sector, not in public, in civil sector of Ukraine, we have gained a huge experience which might be now used by the governmental agencies. Of course, the governmental agencies, they are big players with a lot of bureaucracy, and in many situations they are unable to respond promptly, and in these cases civil society organizations can step in and offer their support. When we come to partners and think about the European Union, about our key partners like Japan, Canada, the United States, you may observe that they have a big part of the international cooperation documents with Ukraine, which is called the cyber dialogue. This includes counteraction to information attacks. With the United States, we had well-established cyber dialogue, and tens of millions, dollars was allocated for this purpose. And I hope that Committee on the Strategic Partnership will develop actively, and we will have continuous partnership in this area. The same is true about the European Union. And I believe that this cyber partnership could be actively developed via our association agreement implementation program. And here I would like to emphasize the importance of joint cooperation between the public sector, between the business sector and civil society sector. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, we lack the understanding of the importance of this counteraction, and we should do this and offer this level of deep cooperation for the international level. And I have to say that now funds allocated for the misinformation counteraction work are bigger, and it was not easy to make this to happen, and unfortunately this requires big resources. And what I have to underscore today, that after a short period of attention to the misinformation campaigns, more attention now is focused on the cybersecurity, while the cyber attacks they are based on single campaigns before elections on some nuclear reactors, before voting, but thinking about electronic voting at the presidential elections in Ukraine, you should clearly keep this in mind, that it might happen with today's level of cybersecurity or insecurity that the president of Ukraine would be elected by robots from Russia. So this again emphasizes the importance of international cooperation in terms of cybersecurity and counteraction to misinformation. Our international agreements should be made efficient in this area. With some countries, our cooperation is sufficient, although potentially it could be strengthened. And also the sphere of geopolitical competition and geopolitical proactive work. Of course, we have the right to sovereign decisions, but in a big opposition between leading countries on the globe, we should wait our position to make it as precise as possible, and then to step in. Any further question? It seems to me that our journalists wish to communicate with you beyond the microphone, and I would like to remind you that the report would be available on the website of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, both in English and Ukrainian versions. And with this, I close this press conference.